We've been taught to see history as a continuous stream, from the ancient to the modern, from what was recorded to what's printed in textbooks. But what if I told you that some pieces were never included in the story? That some discoveries were made, then hidden, dismissed, or worse, treated as if they never existed. Today, you're not just watching a video. You're joining an excavation, not with shovels and pickaxes, but with questions and doubt. Together, we'll uncover mysteries that even scientists hesitate to name. From a mummy with a golden tongue, said to be used to speak with the god of death, to an underground city larger than a kingdom, whose purpose remains unknown. From a 300,000-year-old skull pierced as if by a modern bullet, to a book wrapped around a mummy, written in a language the world has long forgotten. These are not legends. These are real artifacts that have been discovered. But the question is, why aren't they in our history lessons? Why, when a discovery challenges the official script, is it buried instead of investigated? Just imagine, if even one of these mysteries is true, just one, it would be enough to shatter the very foundation of what humanity believes it knows. And maybe, that's why they've been ignored. We're not here to give you answers. We're here to ask the questions no one else dares to ask. Not to retell history, but to challenge how history has been told. History isn't written by the victors. It's edited by the survivors. Each chapter that follows will be a door. And each door will lead to a story that science cannot explain, or worse, intentionally avoids. Are you ready? Buckle up. Mute the noise. Open your mind. We're about to begin the journey into 10 unsolved mysteries that left the world in silence. And the final question won't be, are they real? But rather, who didn't want you to know they were? Mystery 1, the mummy with the golden tongue, a doorway to the afterlife. Among the hundreds of mummies unearthed over the past century, perhaps none has stunned archaeologists and symbologists quite like the 2021 discovery at Taposiris Magna, an ancient Egyptian necropolis near the coast of Alexandria. When researchers unwrapped the linen covering the remains, they found something that was neither bone, nor gemstone, nor a typical funerary object. It was a tongue, crafted from pure gold, thin as a leaf, placed precisely where the real tongue had once been. This object held not only material value but also profound symbolic significance, a rare religious emblem that could overturn much of what we think we know about ancient Egyptian burial rites. According to ancient Egyptian texts, especially the Book of the Dead, the soul, after leaving the body, must undergo judgment in the underworld, where the god Osiris presides. There, the deceased must speak, must defend their life, must recite the declarations of innocence before the scales of Mot, the cosmic scales of justice. But what if the person died of illness? What if their tongue had been cut out? What if they were cursed into eternal silence? In that case, their soul's journey would end abruptly, lost in the void. The golden tongue, in the Egyptian symbolic system, is the final answer. It is the dead reclaiming their voice, even if they had been silenced forever. Why gold? Gold is the only metal that does not oxidize, decay, or degrade with time. In the Egyptian mind, gold was considered the flesh of Ra, the sun god. That's why pharaohs were often wrapped in gold, or buried with golden masks like that of Tutankhamun. But the tongue is the organ of speech. To pair it with gold is to make one's voice immortal. It no longer remains a body part, it becomes a symbol of communication between the living and the divine. Some symbologists even suggest the golden tongue was not merely a protective ritual, but a mark of a messenger. The deceased may have been a priest, a prophet, or a bearer of forbidden knowledge. If he died without passing on what he knew, an entire community could collapse. But if he lived, what he knew could be just as dangerous. Thus, the golden tongue was both a concealment and a preservation. The idea of opening the mouth of the dead is not unique to Egypt. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo Thodol, the Book of the Dead, is read aloud to the dying, to remind the soul of its path. In Judaism, the body is traditionally laid on its left side, close to the heart, believed to be the source of truthful speech. In some Amazonian tribes, those who die with sacred knowledge are cremated, and their ashes mixed with wine to be passed on to the living. But only Egypt, only this civilization, fused language with immortality by creating a tongue that could never decay. In Egyptian mythology, the true name was a force capable of shaping the cosmos. To know the true name of a god was to gain control over that god. If the tongue held the power to speak the true name of a soul, of life, of destruction, then the golden tongue was the most sacred weapon one could bury with the dead. And if that tongue were removed, you would not just be stealing a relic. You would be blocking the path of a soul. You would be killing someone all over again. At least 7 golden-tongued mummies have been discovered in the past 5 years. Yet only 2 have been publicly disclosed. The rest are classified as private research or unfinished projects. Why? Is it to avoid igniting debates about whether ancient religions held real power? Or is it because something was spoken through those golden tongues, and someone decided the world shouldn't hear it? Some radical Western scholars have even proposed that these golden-tongued mummies were remnants of a secret cult, one that history has intentionally erased. Mystery 2, the underground city of Ani, a forgotten system or a hidden ritual. A dead city is not frightening. But a city beneath the earth, silent for millennia, is. Perched on an arid plateau where the wind sweeps across the borderlands of Turkey and Armenia lie the ruins of Ani, once hailed as the city of 1001 churches. But what stunned archaeologists wasn't what remained above ground. It was what lay beneath it. Hundreds of underground chambers, tunnels, hidden rooms, hollow corridors, sacred wells, chapels, granaries, and unmistakable signs of life once thriving far below the surface, buried in stone and silence. Ani, a city that had once been a spiritual nexus for Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam at different times, appears to have built an entire second city underneath itself. The question is, why? And who lived down there, in the dark? In the late 19th century, archaeologists excavated Ani in search of collapsed cathedrals. But the deeper they dug, the more they uncovered structures never recorded in any known text. Underground passageways stretching hundreds of meters. Circular rooms as if built for rituals. Walls inscribed with ancient Armenian symbols, many of which remain undeciphered. Even more disturbing, no one knows how deep this system truly goes. Some tunnels lead straight to the border. Others end abruptly in sealed chambers, suggesting that something was once locked away there, or deliberately forgotten. Why would a flourishing civilization dig so deep into the earth? No one builds underground cities for entertainment. People build them when they need to hide from something too terrifying. Or they need to protect something too sacred from the eyes of the world. Theory 1, a permanent refuge. Some scholars believe the underground system was a wartime shelter, a subterranean fortress to escape invasions. But if it were a place of emergency refuge, why were there domed chapels with intricate stonework? Why were there altars, underground drainage systems, secret passages, and tiny meditation cells just large enough for one person? Was it truly a space for hiding, or a space designed for rituals? Theory 2, a secret ritual order beneath the city. One detail strengthens the ritual theory. Many of the underground rooms contain drawings and symbols that appear nowhere in Ani's public churches. Some carvings resemble spiraling energy sigils. Others depict eyeless figures kneeling before rings of fire. Most striking of all, inverted crosses, or crosses fused with crescent moons. Could it be that beneath Ani, a heretical sect survived? A second religion, exiled from the surface, yet thriving for centuries in darkness? Ani's fall wasn't the result of one event. It suffered wave after wave of conquest, political upheaval, erasure from maps, and was finally abandoned in the 14th century. But historians agree, its disappearance was too sudden, too quiet, and too absolute. So we must ask. Did the existence of the underground city become the reason the entire city was erased? Not because it collapsed naturally, but because it contains something that was never meant to survive? Archaeological maps show at least 7 tunnels that do not connect to any surface entry. They only connect to each other. What we are seeing may not be a means of escape, but a sealed network designed to contain a ritual, guard ancient knowledge, or imprison the practitioners themselves. Darkness is not the absence of light. It is a chosen state. People choose darkness when they don't want anyone to witness what they're doing. Beneath Ani, there is no light. But there are signs of will to survive, will to worship, and possibly will to protect a secret at all costs. The final question is not who dug these tunnels, but rather, what were they running from, or what were they hiding from us? Mystery 3, the two-headed giant Cap DWA, legend or a state-sponsored hoax. In 1673, a group of Spanish sailors reportedly landed in Patagonia, the remote southern tip of South America. There, in the harsh climate and untamed terrain, they claimed to have encountered a towering creature, with 2 heads mounted on a single body. There are no official records. No contemporary sketches. But the legend spread fast. According to some unverifiable folklore and eyewitness accounts, the two-headed giant was captured, held in the ship's hold, and killed by a spear to the heart after rebelling. That body, if the story is true, was Cap DWA. And from there, he began one of the strangest journeys in history. From a bizarre creature from an unbelievable land, to a mummified specimen displayed across Europe and the United States for over 150 years. Starting in the 19th century, the Cap DWA mummy appeared in traveling exhibitions, private collections, and museums. Every description agreed. Height, approximately 3.5 meters, over 11 feet. 2 distinct heads, each with different facial features and proportions. A massive frame, dark skin, and a seamless spinal structure. This mummy is not a myth. It physically exists. It has been photographed, described, and displayed publicly. To this day, Cap DWA remains in a private collection in the United States. So the real question is, what is it? In modern medicine, the phenomenon of having 2 heads is called dicephalic parapagus, a rare form of conjoined twins. Most do not survive more than a few days due to complications with shared organs. Some rare cases, like Abby and Brittany Hensel, have lived into adulthood, astonishing scientists with their ability to coordinate as one. But Cap DWA is nothing like them. He has 2 fully developed heads on a body more than twice the size of a normal human. No signs of surgical stitching. No anatomical inconsistencies between the heads and the body. Nothing, except that science still can't explain him. Theory 1, Gaff taxidermy, a masterful hoax. In the 19th century, freak shows were booming, giving rise to a trend known as gaff taxidermy, the craft of creating fake creatures by sewing together parts from different animals. The famous Fiji mermaid was one such example, half monkey, half dried fish. Could Cap DWA be a similar fabrication? If so, why? Has the mummy been on display for over a century without being debunked? Did contemporary anatomy experts, who would have easily exposed a crude forgery, not leave any records disproving it? Cap DWA might be fake. But if he is, he's a perfect fake, one so convincing it left the scientific world silent. Theory 2, descendant of a lost species. Patagonia has long been associated with tales of giants, from Magellan to Darwin. Some local tribes were indeed unusually tall, with individuals reaching nearly 2 meters, astonishing for that era. Fringe researchers suggest Cap DWA may have been the last descendant of a lost evolutionary branch, a naturally mutated species with stable biology, or even the product of hybridization between humans and something else. The real question isn't, is it logical? It's, why was his existence reduced to a circus sideshow? The irony is, Cap DWA wasn't hidden. He was public, on display, seen by millions. And perhaps because of that, he became too easy to dismiss as fake. That's the strange nature of truth. Something left in plain sight for too long becomes more suspicious than something buried in secrecy. Cap DWA may be a living truth. But because he was paraded to the sound of circus music and mocking laughter, no one wants to hear his story anymore. It's not the deformity. It's not the two heads. It's the way he shatters our absolute idea of what it means to be human. Cap DWA forces us to ask. If such a being could exist without our knowledge, how many more are still being labeled as fantasy? If human biology isn't fixed, then does normal even exist? Mystery 4, the skull with a round hole, a bullet from prehistory. In the early 1990s, at a museum in Kabwe, formerly Twen Duk, southwestern Zambia, archaeologists discovered a strange specimen among the fossilized bones of prehistoric animals. A Homo sapiens skull estimated to be 10,000 to 13,000 years old. But the oddity wasn't its age. It was the perfectly round hole in the middle of the forehead. A small, circular puncture only a few millimeters wide, with smooth, clean edges, almost identical to the entry wound of a high-velocity bullet. There were no fracture lines. No signs of blunt force trauma. No shattered bone fragments around the hole. Modern forensic experts confirm. This is exactly the kind of damage seen in deaths caused by firearms, pistols, rifles, even sniper rounds. But, who pulled the trigger? With what weapon? And in what era? Because 10,000 years ago, humanity was still deep in the late Stone Age. Weapons were limited to sharpened rocks, bone-tipped spears, and wooden javelins. No metallurgy. No brass. No gunpowder. In other words, a bullet wound makes no sense. Whether made of lead, copper, or iron, such a projectile would require technology far beyond that era. Skeptics were quick to explain it away. Perhaps it's the result of a bone deformity or post-mortem damage. But CT scans told a different story. The edges were mechanically abraded with high precision, unlike any known accident. There was no bone regeneration, meaning the injury was fatal and immediate. The hole entered through the forehead and exited the rear, matching the trajectory of a projectile. In short, there was a penetrating force, strong enough to create a clean bullet-like hole, yet unaccounted for in prehistoric technology. A second specimen was found in a museum in Germany. A woolly mammoth skull with a similar round hole in the temporal region. At first, it was thought to be the mark of a predator's bite. But again, the edge analysis revealed no bone fractures. No signs of natural erosion. No bite pattern. Some researchers, like Dr. Grover Krantz, went on record. Perhaps an ancient civilization once existed, one with high technology, that collapsed, leaving behind mysteries our current history cannot explain. The idea sounds like science fiction. But the skull, and its bullet hole, are observable facts, visible to the naked eye, and verifiable through modern imaging. If the wound is real, and could not have been made by Stone Age tools, then one possibility remains. There was once a forgotten civilization, one that reached technological heights, and then disappeared. This theory is known as the high-technology lost civilization hypothesis. It proposes that prehistoric humans may have possessed advanced mechanical engineering, elevated knowledge of physics, and tools we have yet to replicate today. They may have built penetrating weapons, not necessarily modern firearms, but possibly mechanical, electromagnetic, or pneumatic energy devices we still don't understand. Some supporting evidence includes the laser-like precision of stonework at Puma Punku in Bolivia, the non-corroding iron pillar of Delhi, which has remained rust-free for over 1,600 years. And, of course, the skull with a bullet wound, in an era where bullets didn't exist. Naturally, ancient alien theorists have also entered the conversation. If the technology didn't come from Earth's ancient humans, could it have come from off-world beings? The idea of star warriors visiting prehistoric Earth, observing, interacting, even testing weapons on primitive species, has long been popular in speculative fiction. Some ancient cave paintings in Africa and Australia depict humanoid figures wearing what appear to be spacesuits, holding rod-shaped objects, aimed at large animals. If those beings truly existed, then the bullet hole in a 13,000-year-old skull might not be so absurd after all. Of course, all of this could be wrong. Maybe the hole was caused by compressed gas pockets during burial, gnawing from unknown scavengers, or bone erosion caused by microbial activity. But one fact remains. We have no fully convincing explanation for what created it. Which means that bullet hole is still a gap, both literal and symbolic, in our understanding of history. Mystery 5, the room with no entrance in the pyramid, who guards what must not be opened? In 2017, an international team of scientists conducted the Scan Pyramids project, using muon tomography, a space particle-based imaging method similar to X-rays, to scan inside the Great Pyramid of Giza without drilling or causing any damage. The result, a mysterious large void discovered above the Grand Gallery, a well-known ceremonial passageway. This cavity was named the Big Void, and here's what makes it so remarkable. It has no known entrance. It is completely isolated from the rest of the internal architecture. And to this day, no one knows what's inside. Based on sensor data, the void is at least 30 meters long, about 2 meters high, roughly the size of a train carriage. This isn't an accidental air pocket. It's a deliberately created space. It shows no signs of collapse, is not a technical shaft, and does not align with any known ceremonial chamber. So, who built it? And why was it so completely hidden? Some Egyptologists suggest it could be a structural void created to relieve pressure from the Grand Gallery below. However, this theory faces several challenges. If it's just for pressure relief, why make it so long and secretive? Load-bearing chambers in pyramids are usually horizontal and don't sit directly above sacred spaces. The engineering gap theory seems too simplistic for a civilization that aligned its architecture with celestial events, religious symbolism, and mathematical precision. Here's a thought worth pondering. If you wanted to hide a secret for thousands of years, you wouldn't lock it. You wouldn't leave signs it exists. You'd put it in plain sight, at the very center, but make sure no one could reach it. The Big Void is exactly that. It lies in the heart of the Great Pyramid, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of tons of stone. And no one knows how to access it. A room with no entrance might be where something is kept that no one was ever meant to know. 3 major theories. 1. The true tomb, holding someone who was not a pharaoh. Some scholars speculate. What if the pyramid was never meant for Khufu, but for a far more mysterious being? In that case, the Big Void could be the real tomb, and the rest of the pyramid just a decoy. 2. A lost astronomical/technological chamber. Given its celestial alignment down to the exact second of sunlight, some believe this room could house ancient instruments or star maps, perhaps even a forgotten machine. 3. A sealed temple for a living god. In ancient Egypt it was believed that gods walked among men in mummified form, and only fully sealed chambers were sacred enough to contain their divine presence. If the Big Void served such a purpose, then its lack of an entrance isn't a flaw, it's intentional. Because the chamber lies deep within solid rock, any attempt to drill risks causing collapse. The Egyptian authorities are extremely sensitive about opening any new passages, partly for preservation, partly for cultural and spiritual reasons. Scan Pyramids once proposed using microscopic drones or soft robots to slide through microcracks in the stone, but all proposals were rejected. So we're left with this reality. We know the chamber is there, but we are not allowed to enter. Some fringe theorists have made bold claims that the Big Void contains genetic material from a pre-flood civilization. That it is a sealed archive, a kind of lost ancient library of Alexandria. That it holds extraterrestrial objects once gifted to the ancient Egyptians. Whether you believe these or not, remember. Everything discussed here is based on a real, verifiable fact. There is a room. It is locked. No one can open it. And everything else is speculation. This is not just an archaeological dilemma. It is a philosophical question. If you knew that behind a wall lay something that could rewrite all of human history, but opening it might destroy the greatest monument ever built, what would you do? Maybe that's why the chamber remains sealed. Not because we lack the technology, but because we are not yet ready to take responsibility for opening it. A room with no entrance. Guarded by 4,500 years of silence. No lock, yet no one can break in. No guards, yet no one dares trespass. Mystery 6, the undecaying bodies of Italy. In Italy, especially in Naples and Palermo, ancient crypts, monasteries, and churches hold one of the most controversial phenomena in Christian history. Human bodies that have not decomposed, even without embalming. Saint Bernadette Soubirous, died 1879. Her body was found intact when exhumed 30 years later. Father Pio of Pietrelcina, died 1968. His face still appears as though peacefully sleeping, despite no use of chemical preservation. Rosalia Lombardo, known as the Sleeping Beauty of the Catacombs, a little girl who died in 1920, said to have remained unchanged to this day. Notably, many of these bodies were not stored in airtight containers, were not refrigerated, and were never embalmed in the traditional sense. Yet they show no signs of decay, no foul odor, and most remarkably, retain skin elasticity. The Catholic Church refers to this as the phenomenon of incorruptibility, the incorrupt body, considered a sign of absolute sanctity. A body untouched by the normal process of decay, said to be preserved by God. Over 100 such cases have been documented, with a small number officially recognized as miraculous after ruling out all natural explanations. The integrity of the body after death is a symbol of the integrity of the soul before God. Catechism of the Catholic Church. Science, naturally, is skeptical. Some proposed explanations include: environmental conditions. Certain parts of catacombs have low humidity, oxygen deficiency, and stable temperatures, creating conditions similar to natural mummification, like in deserts. Unintentional chemical exposure. Some bodies may have come into contact with formalin, nitrate salts, or antibacterial mold compounds. Maintenance behind the scenes. Bodies placed on display may have been quietly treated by monks or museum staff, undisclosed to maintain a sense of sacred awe. Yet even with these theories, some cases defy explanation. Take Rosalia Lombardo. Her body is not dried out, shows no embalming marks, and her eyeballs remain spherical, something nearly impossible without freezing. When CT scans were performed, blood vessels were still identifiable. In 2009, a video surfaced from the catacombs of the Capuchins, Palermo, showing Rosalia opening her eyes for a few seconds, and then closing them again. Scientists explain it as an optical illusion caused by changing light angles and refraction through her eyelids. But pilgrims insist they've seen it happen with their own eyes. Not once, but many times, at different moments. So the question arises: if light is always the cause, why hasn't the phenomenon been reproduced in a lab? From a spiritual standpoint, incorruptible bodies are not just proof, they are a message. That death is not the end. That holiness can permeate even cells. And that not everything is subject to scientific dominion. Some priests believe these bodies are preserved by God to bear witness to faith in times of decline, prevent the church from losing its way, and serve as living symbols for doubters. But not everyone agrees. Some believe monks intentionally preserved the bodies, to boost religious devotion. Signs like stitches at the base of the skull, faint chemical smells, or seasonal changes in appearance are often cited to challenge the miracle status. Still, no complete forensic analysis has ever been publicly conducted with full Vatican permission. Not everything unexplainable is a miracle, but not every miracle can be explained. Perhaps these incorrupt bodies aren't meant to prove a religion right. Maybe they exist as windows between worlds, where the line between life and death, between physics and spirit, becomes blurred. They compel us to reconsider what death really means. Question whether decomposition is a natural law, or a consequence of spiritual disconnection. And ask, are some bodies preserved to carry an unspoken message? That the soul does not die, and that faith can hold its shape. Maybe it's all coincidence, environment, or image manipulation. But maybe, these bodies are fragments from a forgotten world, where death was not destruction, but simply another form of preservation. Mystery 7, Göbekli Tepe Stone Circles, who built an astronomical site 6,000 years before Egypt? In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating massive stone pillars rising from the hill of Göbekli Tepe, near the border of Turkey and Syria. He didn't find houses. No signs of agriculture. No pottery. No metal. But what he did find were stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in sacred circles, carved with intricate symbols depicting lions, bison, snakes, and even human figures. Estimated age: approximately 11,600 years old. That means it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 6,000 years. And the Mesopotamian civilization, the cradle of writing, by over 5,000 years. Before Göbekli Tepe, science believed humans in the Stone Age lived scattered, nomadic lives with no social structure. Only after agriculture, 9000 BC, did they settle down, form villages, and eventually build temples. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite. People gathered to build temples first, and then learned how to farm to support their belief systems. It wasn't hunger, it was faith that drove humanity into civilization. The stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe are engraved with extraordinarily detailed imagery. Animals that don't coexist, like foxes, cranes, aurochs, and scorpions, appear together on the same pillar, in deliberate patterns. One pillar shows a headless man, blood spurting from the neck, surrounded by predators, interpreted as a sacrificial scene. Another shows hands clasped over the belly, a pose seen in Egyptian mummies, but appearing here millennia earlier. Some scholars believe these are proto-symbols, a form of pictorial language conveying spiritual beliefs, cosmology, or even astronomical knowledge long before writing existed. Many archaeoastronomy studies suggest the central pillars align with the rising and setting of the moon at specific times of the year. Some carvings correlate with major constellations like Cygnus, Leo, and Scorpio. One engraving depicts a falling meteor, which some link to the Younger Dryas impact event, 10,800 BC, an extinction-level cataclysm that cooled Earth abruptly and collapsed ecosystems. If true, Göbekli Tepe could be the first astronomical calendar in human history, a prehistoric meteor observatory, or perhaps more disturbingly, a warning from a lost civilization. Here's the problem. To move a 20-ton stone, stand it upright, and carve it with such precision, without wheels, metal tools, or draft animals, requires a staggering level of organization. This was not the work of simple hunter-gatherers. So who were they? Some researchers believe this was the remnant of a lost civilization, one that achieved technical sophistication but was wiped out by climate events or cosmic disasters. The survivors, they say, built Göbekli Tepe as a bridge between past and present. Maybe they weren't building a temple, but a memory in stone, left behind from an age when humans could still contemplate the stars. One truly baffling fact. After around 1,000 years of use, the builders of Göbekli Tepe buried the entire site themselves, deliberately and carefully. Which means it wasn't destroyed by invaders. It wasn't buried by natural disasters. They chose to bury it, then vanished. Why? Did their beliefs change? Were they hiding something? Or, were they warned not to let it be discovered? Some theories suggest Göbekli Tepe was once a communication site with sky beings, and the burial was an intentional cutting of contact. Göbekli Tepe doesn't fit anything we were taught in history books. It forces us to ask: was Mesopotamia really the first civilization? Did all temples really arise in the Bronze Age? Or are we simply constructing our timeline from what survived, while ignoring what was intentionally buried? Göbekli Tepe may be the birthplace of religion. It may also be the tombstone of a dead civilization. Or, it may be a stone-etched warning of what lies ahead. Mystery 8, the man from Taured, a passenger from a parallel universe. That day, Haneda International Airport in Tokyo, Japan, was bustling with thousands of travelers. Among them was a well-dressed middle-aged man in a suit, polite and fluent in both French and Japanese, someone no one knew would become one of the most bizarre mysteries of the 20th century. When immigration officers checked his passport, everything appeared legitimate. It had valid visas from several European countries. He carried currency from various nations in his suitcase. He even had a driver's license and a business permit. There was just one problem. His passport listed his nationality as Taured. When asked to confirm his country of origin, the man looked confused, and slightly irritated. He pointed at a map of Europe and insisted. Taured lies between France and Spain. We are an ancient nation, over 1,000 years old. But the location he indicated was Andorra. When officials told him that Taured doesn't exist, the man appeared stunned and accused them of either joking or engaging in a political conspiracy. Stranger still. The passport stamps from European customs officials were real, but the dates didn't align with any known travel logs. The company he claimed to work for did exist in Tokyo, but had no record of him. The hotel he said he had a reservation at was real, but had no booking under his name. Authorities decided to detain him overnight in a hotel room near the airport, placing 2 guards at the door 24/7. They also confiscated all his documents for further inspection. The next morning, he was gone. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. No surveillance footage. His documents had vanished with him. The room was still locked from the outside. No emergency exits. No trace. Theories quickly emerged, ranging from logical to supernatural. 1. International spy. He created a fake identity and imaginary country to mask his real origin. Counterpoint: why claim a non-existent nation if you want legitimate entry into Japan? 2. Delusional mental disorder. A man suffering from psychosis, inventing a fake country, history, and identity. Counterpoint: how did he obtain a real passport, authentic currency, and documents that matched existing organizations? 3. Time traveler. He came from a future timeline where Taured exists, but accidentally slipped into the past. 4. Interdimensional traveler. This is the most compelling theory. According to various quantum physics concepts, especially the multiverse theory, every time a decision is made, the universe branches into multiple versions. There may be infinite parallel realities, where maps, history, and politics differ due to small divergent events. So what if the man had somehow fallen out of his own timeline, and drifted into ours? In his universe, Taured is real. In ours, it's Andorra. And Haneda Airport in 1954 was a thin membrane, a portal between 2 worlds. If the universe is a fabric, then sometimes, a single tear is enough for a stranger to slip through from the other side. What's even more chilling? Taured doesn't just appear in the 1954 incident. Some people claim to have dreamed of maps with Taured in Europe. Ancient medieval maps occasionally feature faint references to Taured in the Pyrenees region. In certain games, novels, and short stories from the early 1900s, Taured is mentioned, though no one knows how the authors learned the name. Could this name have once existed in some forgotten layer of human memory? The man from Taured may have been a lunatic, a hoax, or a mystery that can never be proven. But the story's persistence, and science's helplessness in facing a logic that shatters our world map, has kept it alive in the imagination of generations. Not everything left out of history books is untrue. And if one day, you find yourself at the border between two countries, and the map in your hand no longer matches reality, ask yourself, are you lost? Or have you accidentally stepped into another timeline? Mystery 9, the EILEAN Lighthouse, where 3 keepers vanished into thin air. Christmas, 1900. 3 lighthouse keepers were sent to EILEAN, a desolate island in the Flannan Isles of Scotland, to tend the beacon that guided ships through dangerous waters. Their names were Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, Donald MacArthur. They were scheduled for a 2-week shift. No one expected they would never return. On December 15, a passing ship noticed something strange. The lighthouse was dark. No light. No signal. No response over radio. Due to severe storms, a relief crew didn't arrive until 11 days later. What they found would become one of the most haunting sea legends in history. Upon landing, the lighthouse door was locked from the inside. Dinner was left uneaten on the table, cold, but fresh. The clock had stopped at the same moment the light had gone out. Only one raincoat hung neatly, the other 2 were missing. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. But near the cliff's edge outside, a broken mooring hook lay on the ground. And inside the logbook, a strange final entry from the head keeper. The storm is terrible. MacArthur is crying. Never seen anything like it. The eerie part? There was no storm recorded in the region that day. The sky had been completely calm. The government report concluded. 2 men likely went out to secure the hook. The 3rd ran out to help them. All 3 were swept away by a rogue wave. But that theory raises more questions than it answers. Why would MacArthur, known as a hardened veteran, be crying? Why would only one man wear a raincoat if a storm was raging? And why were no bodies ever recovered, despite mild currents in the area? Other theories, when logic no longer works. 1. Murder-suicide. But there were no signs of blood or violence. 2. Pirate attack. No valuables were taken, no forced entry. And why would pirates abduct 3 lighthouse keepers in secret? 3. A mini-tsunami. But there was no sign of seawater flooding inland, and the broken hook was intact, not ripped apart by force. Also, what about the log entry referencing a non-existent storm? 4. Supernatural phenomenon. Some theories suggest the island lies on a magnetic anomaly, distorting perception and causing time slips. A shapeless entity guards the lighthouse, and the 3 men saw something they were never meant to see. Local fishermen had long avoided the Flannan Isles. A monk once lived on the island, but mysteriously abandoned it. Sailors spoke of singing in the wind, strange lights in the fog, and birds flying in reverse on odd-numbered days. A Celtic legend claims the island was once a place where Heaven's Gate opened, but was later sealed. Every 100 years, if someone stays past the 13th day, the gate opens again. The men disappeared on day 14. More than a century has passed. A memorial stands in their honor. EILEAN remains uninhabited. The lighthouse is now fully automated. Yet sailors still whisper. They sometimes see a light moving with no operator. On certain nights, radio equipment picks up a repeated transmission. We are still here. Some even claim to have seen 3 figures standing in the mist before the lighthouse. They don't move. They don't speak. They don't disappear. We can laugh and call it coincidence, accident, or an embellished folktale. But if those 3 men weren't swept away, didn't kill each other, and didn't run, then perhaps they walked through an invisible doorway into a place beyond human language, beyond anything we were meant to understand. Mystery 10, the 800, YEAR, OLD spacesuit in Mongolia, evidence of time travel. In 2016, inside a frozen mountain cave in the Altai Range, a remote mountainous region on the border between Mongolia and Russia, archaeologists unearthed a mummified woman estimated to be nearly 800 years old. But what shocked the world wasn't the mummy itself. It was the outfit she was wearing. The woman was dressed in what appeared to be a pressure-padded garment. Unusual stitching patterns. Protective hand coverings. And most bizarre of all, rubber-soled waterproof boots with a pattern eerily similar to Adidas. Upon closer examination, the boots were made from animal leather, but the soles were segmented rubber, resembling modern designs. The seams and stitching did not match traditional Mongolian techniques of that era, but resembled reinforced patterns used in high-pressure suits. The inner lining was thermally insulated, resembling material used in modern space suits. Radiocarbon dating confirmed. She lived sometime between the 12th and 13th century, during the height of the Mongol Empire. She was not of noble status, her tomb lacked weapons or gold. Yet her grave contained items like a leather pouch, a comb, a mirror, and a knife made of rare alloy. Even more puzzling. On her hand was a copper-coated electrode, resembling a primitive electrical conductor. Some archaeologists dubbed her the Altai priestess. Others questioned. What if she didn't belong to that time, but was trapped in it? Many skeptics quickly responded. The boots only coincidentally resemble Adidas, don't overthink it. Rubber-like materials can form naturally in volcanic environments. There's no evidence for time travel, this is just coincidence. But how many coincidences before it's no longer just a coincidence? Because this isn't the first case of objects out of time. Artifacts that don't belong to their timeline. 1. The Baghdad Battery, 250 BCE, a ceramic jar with a metal core that can produce a small electric current. But electricity wasn't discovered yet. 2. The Piri Reis Map, 1513, a map that accurately depicts the Antarctic coastline without ice, visible only thousands of years ago. 3. A miniature Swiss watch found inside a sealed Ming Dynasty tomb in China, untouched for over 400 years. 4. And now, a 13th century pressure suit in the Altai Mountains. Physicists like Kip Thorne and Michio Kaku have long stated. Mathematically, time travel is possible, if we can control dark energy or wormholes. But what if humans didn't invent time travel? What if a lost civilization did, and left behind fragments we now call artifacts? Perhaps the woman was a time-displaced astronaut. A test subject for a travel experiment who never made it back. Or a witness to a cosmic event history deliberately erased. Most intriguing of all, her outfit bore spiral-shaped stitches, a symbol that matches ancient diagrams of warped gravitational fields. We could easily dismiss this as a hoax, media exaggeration, or cultural misinterpretation. But as one researcher put it, we prefer stories with clear endings, because they make us feel like we understand the world. Yet artifacts like this 800-year-old space suit are cracks in the wall built by history. And in every crack, there might be a civilization, a timeline, or a truth that humanity simply isn't ready for yet. You've just walked with us through 10 mysteries. 10 cracks in what once seemed like the unshakable wall of history. From an Egyptian mummy with a golden tongue, a material meant for the afterlife, to the underground city of Ani, built to remain undiscovered. From skulls punctured as if by modern bullets, to a 13th century space suit, lying silently beneath the snow of Mongolia. Each mystery is a reminder. The truly frightening thing isn't what we don't know. It's what we do know, but have deliberately buried. Have you noticed something strange? Not a single mystery in this video appears in any school textbook. Not one artifact is displayed in the world's famous museums. And not one explanation is repeated on national television. Why? Because they don't fit the script we were told to believe. If you've stayed with us this far, you're no longer just a viewer. You're a seeker, one of the rare few willing to stare into the things no one dares to name. And what comes next will not be lighter. It will go deeper. It will shatter what you thought was certain. And it will ask questions that may make you never see the world the same again. Prepare for part 2. Click subscribe so you don't miss when the next chapter is unlocked. And if you know of a mystery no one else dares to speak of, leave it in the comments. We'll hunt it down. Because Veil of Mystery isn't just a channel. It's where the hidden is remembered.